Marketing and Communications Manager at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know we will allow time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. So please write your questions down in the chat area as they come to mind. If we don't have time to answer them all, we will make them available on our website. Next slide, please. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. Next slide, please. DCL services help you refine your document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs, today and in the future. Next slide, please. DCL serves a broad client base. Next slide, please. Spanning all industries. Today we are thrilled to introduce Nicki L. Davis, Ph.D. So without further ado, welcome Nicki Davis.
Okay. Very, very much, Adam. Thank you for the introduction. And I'd like to thank DCL for giving me the opportunity to share my experience of content conversion. I'd like to begin by telling you a little bit about how I got into the business and how someone with a Ph.D. in chemistry, of all things, ended up doing user experience content strategy. And it started in graduate school when I was doing my thesis research. On the left, you see my point of view. I had a sample, and I needed to get a spectrum, which you might say is the sort of a chemical fingerprint of that sample. And I wanted to go take this sample, get this spectrum, find out what was going on in the sample, then make another sample, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But unfortunately, there was a huge obstacle in my way. This thing. This is the instrument that I had to use to get a spectrum from that sample. You put the sample in it, then you do all those knobs and dials and stuff on the instrument, and then you get your spectrum. It was 6 feet tall, 6 feet wide, and it took me 6 months to learn how to use it. And, you know, I don't really care to learn how to use this silly thing. I don't care how it works. I just want to get from my sample to my spectrum and go back and forth and get a spectrum as soon as possible. So I said to myself, nobody should have to go through this to get their work done. This is ridiculous. So I decided to improve the user experience of the instrument for myself and my fellow graduate students. And I did that in the only part of the user interface that was accessible to me, and that was by writing a manual. A very rudimentary manual, but it was task-oriented, and it saved people a lot of time learning it, and it saved the instrument managers a lot of time not answering questions. And I finished this manual 2 years before I finished my dissertation. And I said to myself, oh, golly, I think, and it turns out there were lots of other people were concerned about using technology and having to learn the technology, and it got in the way of what they really wanted to do. And so now that's what led to my career after graduate school. And sometimes you can improve the user experience by just writing a manual, as I did, you know, creating good content. Other times you have to redesign the whole user interface. And sometimes it's a combination of both. But either way, the objective is to deliver a superb user experience. That's what to our users, and that's why we're all in this business. So, enough about me. I'll go on with the agenda for today. Today I'm going to talk about a case study where a company I worked for had to convert its content to XML, specifically Darwin Information Typing Architecture, or DITA. And I'd like to tell you how the project got started, and then describe the major areas: content analysis, writer training and pilot, content conversion, where we needed outside help, where we needed trusted partners to help us convert our content. And then I'll conclude with lessons learned, and as Adam mentioned, we'll have a Q&A at the end. So I'll start with the project initiation. Why did we do this? What problem were we trying to solve? We already had a content management system. Why on earth would we want to go through all the trouble to install a brand new content management system and go through all the headaches of content conversion? Well, the reason was we had a content crisis on our hand. Device proliferation. At that time when the project started, late 2009, early 2010, mobile devices weren't as prevalent as they are today, but we knew that was on the horizon. We knew that was coming. And there was no way we could craft separate versions of our content for different devices. No way. So we had to find a way to have one source, single source, multiple devices. Okay. The other problem was content silos. The technical documentation team had one silo, one thing of content. The technical support was another. Those were the two main silos. And then, of course, there was training, marketing, field service. And for that reason, the content lacked standardization and consistency. And where would a customer coming to our website, where do I get the answer? You know, is it in the technical documentation or the technical support stuff? Okay. Finally, the individual stakeholders had only a limited grasp of the big picture. Nobody had what you might call the view from 30,000 feet that could see how all the stakeholders interacted. So that was why we decided to do this. Now, I'd like to begin by giving credit to a core team of 3 people, with 2 people who came after, who did what I call the heavy lifting. Beth Fryer, Timothy Martin, and Dan Classens. And later on they were joined by Faith Weber, who did a lot of good with the new content management system, and Doug O'Neill, who did a lot with the publication, making sure publication worked correctly in the new system. By heavy lifting, as I said, I meant things like getting management approval, evaluating all the tools, choosing vendors for tools and other services, deciding when we needed outside help, calculating the cost, negotiating with the vendors, making the decisions, and managing the training and rollout to the writing team. And so this webinar today is very much the perspective of a writer on the ground who was affected by these decisions. I wasn't a member of the core team, but I was very affected by their decisions. So I'd like to begin by telling you just an overview of the 8 tasks. There were 8 tasks that the core team of 3 people found out that we needed outside help, that we couldn't go it alone. I'll tell you more about these tasks later. But for now, I'd like to introduce this report card metaphor. I'm going to assign a grade to the performance of each task. Now, some vendors, there were 8 tasks, and we had 4 different partners. So some partners did more than one task, obviously. So I'll begin with the first task on the list, which is content analysis. Now, you might remember I said before that one of our problems was nobody had the view from 30,000 feet. Nobody could see all of the stakeholders, find out all the concerns of all the stakeholders. And this was where we did hire an outside consultant to analyze our content. And the report that the person gave, this is a summary of it here, is that they clarified the problem. You know, they just defining the problem is half the battle. And then they said the design goals of any system that we put in place, and these are requirements for the new system. There's nothing here about how to do it. This is all about what to do. Nothing about tools, nothing about data. So just going through the problems one by one, people want Google. We delivered books, or rather we delivered PDFs. One product had over 20 different PDFs. Now imagine trying to find the answer to your question, searching through, okay, which PDF do I look in, etc., etc. Now the answer was to put everything in one place and provide navigation. It is possible to search PDFs, put PDFs on the website and search them, but the user experience, results of the search don't deliver a very good user experience, shall we say. So we knew we couldn't go on doing PDFs. And the other issue was versioning. We supported multiple versions of our software, and so we needed content that specified which version it was referring to. Another issue was that the internal users, as I mentioned before, that's one of our crises, created overlapping content, and there's no way we could maintain all this. And the solution to that problem was that technical documentation deliverables must be fully searchable with the technical support external website at a minimum. Okay, now customers don't care who wrote the information, which department wrote it. They just wanted to get the answer to their question, and they wanted it to be the right answer. So, and the other thing, of course, that we had to do was establish clarity of ownership, which is really a governance issue rather than a technology issue, which is, okay, technical support does this, technical documentation does that. A third problem was that the subject matter experts, or SMEs, were frustrated by all that overlapping content. They didn't want to have to review the same kind of information once for technical support and once for technical documentation. Okay. Another frustration was the glacial pace for them of the review and correction cycle. Some of our products were released every 2 years. So you'd have a scenario where an SME, a subject matter expert, usually an engineer, would find something that needed to be corrected or changed, and they'd make the change. The writer would enter it in the old content management system, have it reviewed by the SME, it would be blessed by the SME, and then it would sit in the content management system for another 2 years, up to another 2 years until the next release came out of the PDF. So that had to change. So the system, the best system to do that was to have all the content in one place and give the SMEs special permission so that they could go in and comment on those topics. And those comments would be funneled to the writer in charge, whether it was the technical documentation people or the technical support people. Then the writer, the author, could make the correction, have it reviewed by the subject matter expert. The subject matter expert would give his blessing, and then the site administrator would, once it was complete, would push it out to the website immediately rather than waiting 2 years for the next release. And finally, we had no information on which pages were viewed most often. We had about 40,000. A lot of our information, a lot of our content had been written by engineers, and we wanted to improve it. But we had no idea which of it was more important, which of it was most important. Where do we start? So the consultant suggested that we choose a system that provided some kind of analytics so that we could find out which pages were looked at most often. If we wanted to rewrite them or improve them in some way, we could concentrate on those. So now I'll tell you what grade I gave to the partner who analyzed the content. That was an A+. It was really, really very, very good. She was, again, because she was a neutral observer, able to break the silos and help us to see the forest for the trees. So the core team's decision to have an outside observer do this was spot on, and she just did a great job for us. Now I'll go to the next portion of the selection of where we needed outside help, the next stage of the project where we needed outside help, and that's selecting a CMS vendor and writer training and pilot. Now, we already knew from the first that our existing content management system did not meet our requirements. We tried and tried and tried, especially it didn't have versioning, and so it was just not suitable. The core team did a lot of research and found 2 CMS vendors whose systems did meet our requirements. And both of those systems required DITA. So we didn't move to DITA just for the sake of moving to DITA. We did it because it was required. We needed it to meet our design goals. And the core team had each vendor install their system with sample content at our site, and the writing team evaluated each system, and this happened about mid-2010 for 1 week, and the core team took our feedback into account in making their decision about which vendor they wanted. And that also gave us, that was part of our training, that gave us the sort of a heads up, you might say, on that DITA was coming, and this is what a little bit about what it would be like. Okay, so the next thing that the core team did was to they oversaw the preparing the writing team for the change. They bought a lot of books on DITA, best practices, that sort of thing. They scheduled a 1-week training class in DITA with an outside vendor, with an outside partner, a 3-day training class on the CMS. This was given by the vendor of the content management system. Okay, and most important, they scheduled a 6-month pilot period to develop what's called the information model and implement the CMS on our content. And I should say that both our partners did a tremendous job during this stage, training us and helping us implement the CMS and the information model on our system. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about the pilot. One partner, who I refer to as partner number 2, helped with writer training on DITA and with the information model. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with DITA, and please, any DITA gurus in the audience, please bear with me. With the information model specifies exactly which parts of the DITA standard we needed for our content. Okay, there are many, many ways to do things in DITA. We need to decide which ones we needed. There were innumerable decisions that had to be made. Details, the devil's in the details, as they say. And that was why we farmed out certain issues to individual writers who conduct research, and make recommendations, because we had this system that we had imported some of our content into the new system, and we were sort of experimenting in it. And areas of interest, like how are we going to handle context-sensitive help? What was our reuse strategy going to be? Were we going to do things only at the topic level? Were we going to allow content reuse within a topic? How were we going to handle cross-references, etc., etc., etc.? And again, I just wanted to say once more that the CMS vendor, who is partner number 3, helped with training and implementation of the CMS. We writers didn't interact with them much because we were really concentrating on the DITA, but I must say that they worked, and the core team worked very, very well together to make sure that things kept running smoothly, that we were able to use the new system to do our DITA research. On average, I'd say the writers devoted about 20% of their time to the pilot, because we all had deliverables that we had to produce from the old content management system. And one of the things that made this thing work was good communication. The writing team met together weekly in a conference call with both partners. So the pilot was a very, very big success. And you won't be surprised at the grades that I give to our two partners for this stage. Training writers in DITA and training in the CMS tools. By XML and CMS tools, I mean, you have an XML authoring tool, and then you have the content management system, and they sort of have to talk to each other. And we essentially had to learn two tools, the XML editing tool and the content management tool to store things in the content management system database. And okay, so I've given the writer training by the DITA an A+ and an A- for the XML for vendor number 3. Not because vendor number 3 was bad. I mean, it was definitely A-level work, but wow, the vendor number 2 training in DITA, they were just so outstanding, and they just did such a really stellar performance on that. And you'll see that when we went to the pilot, those roles were reversed. Here, vendor number 3 shone, was really stellar performance there. And again, vendor number 2 was the information model. They answered our questions. They'd obviously seen all of this before. We were able to benefit with their experience helping others, but not that they were so bad, but it's just that the folks who did the help with the pilot, the CMS vendor, was just fantastic. So now we've done our pilot and we're ready to migrate our content, which is the next step. It's the content conversion. Now, the first step in the content conversion, going from our old CMS to the new one, was something we had to do ourselves. Now, for those of you who don't know DITA or topic or what a content management system does, I'll just say that the existing content management system had the content cut up into pieces called topics. Okay. And writers would work on individual topics, and then the content management system would publish that to whatever output we wanted, whether it was PDF, HTML pages, whatever. Unfortunately, because that content management system was not based on DITA, there's something about DITA that those of you who know it, is that each topic in DITA has to be assigned one of the 3 information types: task, concept, or reference. Okay, so we had to go to our original content management system and mark each and every topic that we wanted to move over to the new system. We had to mark it as a task, concept, or reference. The other thing we needed to do, because it was indeed a content management system, we were already sharing content, topics, and graphics. And we had to inventory what was being shared in which deliverables in the original CMS and mark those topics as being shared. And that way we could avoid importing the same topic multiple times into the new CMS. And ditto for the graphics. Those of you who know DITA are familiar with the concept of content references, or conrefs. This allows you to embed some piece of text within multiple topics. That way, if changes need to be made to that piece of text, all you need to do is edit the text in one topic instead of doing search and replace in dozens of topics. And this is very, very helpful for things that can change at the last minute, like product names or whatever. Our old content management system didn't use DITA, as I said, but it did have a feature equivalent to these conrefs. And these had to be found and inventoried. And again, we had to do this ourselves, and we knew this. We had no choice. Now I'll come into the point where we did need help, lots of help from our partners. Okay. In our last slide, we had prepared the content in the old CMS for export. And so the old content management system allowed you to publish to XML files, and we did that, but of course they weren't DITA XML. So we had to run them through a conversion script that was supplied by one of our partners to convert it to DITA. Then once we had the DITA files, would import them to the new content management system where it would be cleaned up and checked, to make sure everything made it through, etc. And we put that on a staging server, And then once the content had been cleaned up, we would transfer it to a production server. And that was where the writers could work on it. And it was there that the writers would publish the content. And for that we needed publication script that would interpret the DITA code that we had on the production server and push it to whatever whatever output type we wanted, whether it was PDF or HTML help or ebook or whatever. So you see we had 3 different points here where we needed help from our partners: the conversion script, the publication, and the cleanup. Now, before I start talking about the conversion script and the publication script, I'd like to say a little bit more about cleanup. Now, some cleanup is always necessary, and the less intelligent, quote-unquote, the original content, the more manual cleanup will need to be necessary. Now, what is intelligent content? And again, that's another name for DITA content, is intelligent content. What it means is that instead of marking things with styles that specify formatting, say boldface, italic, or use fixed width, courier, new, 10-point, whatever, you mark things, mark the content with labels that tell what it means. For example, instead of saying, okay, this is a API name, so it has to be boldface, fixed width, 10-point. Instead, in DITA, you mark that with API name. Okay, and there are many, many elements in DITA, and again, that was one of the reasons why we had to do the information model to tell you, what to use. So just to tell you, why do you go to all that trouble? Why have intelligent content? Well, this is the sort of magic that you can do with intelligent content. You can adapt it to it allows you to adapt the appearance of the content to different devices. Okay. Here you have exactly the same procedure produced from exactly the same content. This isn't a real example, by the way. This isn't any of our real content. This is just sort of a theoretical example that I made to illustrate my point. You see how on the PDF, you have a command here that tells the user what action to take. Then you have a separate paragraph for the result of that action. Second step starts with an action that you want the user to take. And then it has this information that tells you what essential information that you need to complete the action. Now you notice on the smartphone output, we've gotten rid of the numbers on the steps to save space. And on the second step, the enabled checkbox, this paragraph about the enabled checkbox is just indented, and that's the way that the system chose to was programmed to format this. But look how the paragraph on the first step's been omitted. Okay. Now that is what intelligent content allows you to do. The DITA specification says that we mark this paragraph here with something called command, saying that's with a special tag that says this is the action we want the user to take based on meaning. This is called semantic markup. This paragraph would be marked with a DITA tag that says this is the result of doing the step, okay, of taking the action. Again, on this one, this would be marked as this is the action in DITA, the action the user wants to take. And this would, again, would be marked as essential information that you need to execute the step, all based on the meaning and the purpose of the content. And that sort of intelligence, quote unquote, is what allows you to do this sort of magic here. I'm not passing any judgment about you should do smartphone this way, output this way. I'm just doing this, as I say, to illustrate what you can do. Well, let's take a look at the actual markup and why is this a problem? You know, why does when you're moving from unintelligent content to intelligent content? Well, the problem is you have a script that doesn't know. Let me take a look at that second paragraph in the step. Remember, the one that's formatted to be underneath or whatever. Okay. This is an example of unintelligent content. It's just like I've just used HTML code as an example. You know, you have a list element here in DITA, you have a step element, but here you have a paragraph, which is just a formatting specification, and that maps to the DITA element called step result for this step. In the second step, the underneath paragraph again is a paragraph element in HTML, but in DITA it maps to an info element. So the smartest script in the world is not going to be able to know whether to map that paragraph to a step result or to an info element. And there's a third element that you can put inside a step called step example. And so the way to solve this problem is you just have the script say, okay, let's map when you see a paragraph within a list element, we'll just map it to one of the three, say info. And then someone later will have to do the cleanup. You'll need an intelligent, someone with intelligence, a person will have to go in there and look at the output and say, they made this an info, that's good, or the script turned this into an info, but that really is a step result. Now, I'll tell you, intelligent content, but you don't really need to know the content, much about the content, to be able to make those kinds of decisions here. And that's why, as I say, so anytime you're going from non-semantic to semantic or intelligent content, you're always going to have some kind of cleanup. And I've gone through this in some detail because I wanted to make sure that you understand what you can, to make clear exactly what you can expect a conversion script to do and what you can't expect it to do. You can't expect it to make a judgment between what's a step result, a step example, or an info, the meaning of the content. But you can indeed, so if you're going from non-semantic, unintelligent content to semantic content, you're always going to have to do some manual cleanup by a person. And I would say that we hired an outside person to do that, an outside partner, and she did a fantastic job. And we learned a lot about DITA from this lady. Let's see, she was with us the first 6 months of 2012, and we hired her to do this sort of manual cleanup that was necessary for unintelligent to intelligent content. And again, that was why we were able to hire an outside person, because you didn't really need to know much about the content, but you did need to know data to do this sort of work. And I give her an A+, because she was really great. Unfortunately, the cleanup turned out to be a lot more work than we expected, because the conversion script that was made by one of our partners, and here's one of these line items that we had farmed out to them, it wasn't not only not intelligent, it was really, really awful. Now I'm going to show you on the next slide to show you what I mean. Here we have the original PDF output from the original content management system, and of course we wanted the PDF output from the new content management system to look exactly like this. But when we ran it through the conversion script, imported it, and then published it to PDF, this is what we got. The script was unable to recognize and I showed you some of the code, that this was definitely a different element in the original code, right? And it should have been able to map this to an info element and this to another info element, some default element. But it didn't do that. It created a step for each and every paragraph. And it didn't know what to do with those paragraphs that were within the steps, and it actually duplicated them, stripped off the formatting. That's the text in red here. It didn't color them red. I just put this in red to show you what it had done. Now, these were totally unexpected. We thought at minimum the darn conversion script should be able to recognize a step and assign the numbers correctly, but it didn't do that in the data, but it didn't do that. So that meant that there was a heck of a lot more work that our cleanup partner had to do. And, well, she did what she could under the circumstances, but the scope of the work was much, much larger than we thought it would be. So the writers ended up doing cleanup. And I must say, from my personal experience, this sort of thing, cleanup is no fun, this kind of manual cleanup. And so, but we had to do it so that it was part of the process. And I suppose you can guess what grade I'm going to give the partner that created the conversion script. Okay, an F. I should mention that same partner also did the publication scripts. And I give that partner a D on publication scripts, because they, the publication scripts, they just weren't interpreting the data correctly for all outputs like they were supposed to. And you see, the output had to look right. And ultimately we dropped the vendor, and we had to spend extra money on a different vendor who did do a creditable A-level job. We had to spend extra money, and because the output scripts had to look right. We could get by with just doing manual cleanup on the conversion scripts, but the output had to look right. But we had to spend extra money to do it, because this vendor, this partner here, couldn't the scripts weren't that good. So you'll notice I've named all the partners, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, which of those 4 was it that did such a terrible job on the publication scripts and the conversion scripts? Well, it was partner number 2. It was the partner that was so fantastic at training and who took us through the pilot to help us develop our information model, did a creditable job there, but they had absolutely no experience with doing publication scripts or conversion scripts. And so this is their report card, A+, A-, D, and F. And they had no experience with content conversion. So I guess now we can proceed to the lessons learned. Now, for us writers, I would say that the professional data training and assistance with the information model from vendor number 2, which was their domain of expertise, worked very well. We absolutely needed their guidance and their experience helping others do this. The CMS vendor support during the pilot, again, we weren't affected by that directly, but we knew that the system was almost always online and available for us so that we could do our ditto work. So that was a very good decision on the part of the core team. That was the right judgment call by them. And I will say from my personal experience of that, I didn't really understand data, intelligent content, semantic markup until I did it on our own content. I mean, we all did training on sample content and all this, but you don't really understand it until, I didn't really understand it until I went through the process with our own content and developed our own information model and implemented and used the authoring tools on our own content. And as I mentioned earlier, the mechanics of moving from unintelligent to intelligent content are challenging. It is a lot of drudge work, even if you have a perfect conversion script, because if you're going from unintelligent content, you're going to have to do some manual cleanup, and which, as I mentioned, is no fun. However, I will say that intelligent content is fantastic. Once you learn it, learn how to do it, I don't know how many times I've said, oh, gee whiz, this is a window title. This is a title of a window. Oh, what does the style guide say? Are those supposed to be boldface, bold italic, left alone? What do I do? With DITA, all I do is mark it as a win title, and the output script takes care of all the formatting. I don't have to think about formatting, and that is really fantastic. So for those of you who haven't made the transition to intelligent content, at least for me, I did find it's worth the effort. So finally, for project managers, the lessons for project managers: when a partnership works, it saves time and prevents frustration. As I said, if we tried to figure out how to use DITA on our own, if we tried to figure out how to use the CMS, the new CMS on our own, we'd still be trying to figure it out. And a second lesson is go for a partner with experience in the areas where you need help. Hiring an inexperienced partner is a false economy. The partner was really excellent reputation in one area, that partner number 2, but they had no experience in the other areas, so they were really over their heads, and that's why the conversion script and the publication scripts were so subpar, shall we say. Even with the inexperienced partner, it was still worth it to get outside help. I don't question the decision of the core team to get outside help for the conversion scripts, but it's just that the partner was just not up to the task. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd like to open up the floor for questions.
Well, thank you, Nicki. This has definitely been a very informative webinar indeed. The first question that has come in is, why did you have to convert all that content?
Well, as I said, the company has been in business for 30 years, okay, and they had a lot of legacy content. Most of the time they tell you, well, just start with the new system on, with the new stuff, and then move the legacy stuff over. With us having all that legacy content, about 30 different products, and like up to 3 releases of each one, we had no choice but to do the legacy content. And actually, we did do a triage. We didn't convert all of it, but there was just such a huge body of content that had to be converted. And, indeed, the technical support folks, their website talked about stuff that happened 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, releases before. So that was the reason. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. The next question that's come in is, you gave an example of the challenges of converting from unintelligent to intelligent content. But what if you already have content with semantic style names?
You mean suppose you have intelligent content and say Microsoft Word styles with and within steps you have 3 styles: step result, info, and step example, so that they can map directly to the data elements. Well, obviously that was not our experience, but it seems logical that if you have intelligent content to intelligent content, you're going to have a much easier time of it. Adam, have you folks at DCL have any experience with that scenario?
Not on the top of my head, but let me go looking and asking some of the project managers and see if they've had experience anything like that. And if so, we will include it in our blog and tweet about it.
Yeah, it does seem logical that the script, if you're putting the intelligence in the content to begin with, and it's the right kind of intelligence, that it should be able to convert it. Like even things like API name. There's no reason you can't in a Word document create a Word style to called API name, and of course that would map directly to the data style. But then there's the question of compliance. Would the writers remember to do that? Would it be done correctly? There's always the kind of cleanup where you have to check things and make sure everything made it through, do the comparison of the PDF, say the PDF output from the old system to the new system. So that sort of work always has to be done, but that can be done by an outside partner. So I don't know, does that answer the question?
It appears it has. And if there's a follow-up, Nicki, I'll let you know. The next question that came in was, why didn't you do something about the conversion script?
Well, we had only limited resources. Okay. The point is we only had a certain amount of time for that. The same vendor that did the conversion scripts also did the publication scripts, and we had to make the publication script a priority. The output had to look right. Okay. The other thing was the conversion script. We didn't convert all the content at one time. We started the conversion process in early 2012, and we converted most of it by early 2013, so we could sort of spread the pain out over a longer period of time, So, but it was essentially a resource issue. And then, as I said, with the publication script, we only had a limited funds, and so we had to put, when we hired another vendor, I guess I could call them vendor number 5, they did a creditable job, but we only had enough money for we only had enough resources for the publication scripts.
Well, thank you, Nicki. The next question that's come in is, why did you decide, or what did you decide to do about conrefs?
Conrefs. Well, we decided, we did a lot of experimentation with them during the pilot. And our experience was that for our content, they were more trouble than they were worth for the most part. We did eventually use them for a specific subset of the content, the installation guides, where you would have many variations on a single procedure, where each procedure would have a unique step and all the other steps would be the same. So in those cases, we would use conrefs for the common steps, and then just put the unique step in there. But it was only a very small subset of the content. We had heard about other companies using product names as conrefs. We didn't try that out, but it sounds like I don't know. I would have to ask somebody else with experience. We just found that, you know, when someone tried to go into someone else's content where there were a lot of conrefs, it was very difficult to maintain. So that's why we just minimized the number of conrefs that we did. Anyone else?
Yes, Nikki. This is as of now the last question that has come in, and it is, what did you decide to do about cross-references?
Cross-references. Now, those of you who are data gurus know about rel tables, and they say don't put cross-references inside a topic, you know, although data allows you to do that. Well, that's a big issue when you have a lot of reuse at the topic level, and that's to use rel tables. But we didn't have that much topic reuse. I'd say no more than 20% of our topics, probably less, were reused. And given that, you know, we decided not to use rel tables because, again, one of the writers investigated that, and they were just so complicated and so difficult to use. So we ended up doing cross-references in places, you know, for topics that we knew weren't shared, and just, you know, just saying goodbye to rel tables, because as I said, it was a real learning headache and a maintenance headache for us. So.
Well, thank you, Nikki. At this time, that appears to be all the questions we have received. So I'd like to thank you again on behalf of DCL and all of our attendees. Thank you so much for this wonderful and informative webinar. I'd like to thank on behalf of DCL for everyone who's attended this webinar. Thank you. This concludes today's broadcast. You'll be able to access the recorded version of this webinar in the archives section of our website, which is www.dclab.com. Our next webinar will be next Wednesday, June 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, titled Training, a Key Component of the Global Information Experience, presented by Joan LaSalle, co-founder and president of LaSalle Ramsey, and Amber Swope, data specialist at Data Strategies. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.